Could be.
Here we go. Tank, stop.
Yelling at dogs.
Hello, welcome to Covendom. This is season 3, episode 4, and our topic tonight is going to be traditions of witchcraft. I am Brian Cain, and this is my co-host Levi Rowland. We are still not down in the store where we normally have our show, so we're doing it from my home still. There's a lot of internet problems in the French Quarter. They're rewiring everything, so bear with us. We don't want to, lose the internet all the time. I don't really like this camera. It's very high quality, but it's not very flattering. So, it is what it is. This is kind of what we look like. I kind of look like an aging beauty, and Levi kind of looks homeless.
No, he doesn't.
So that's just sort of how it is.
Just hatefulness.
Anyway, so our topic tonight is going to be witchcraft traditions. So this show is about initiatory craft. So we predominantly speak from our vantage point as Alexandrian high priests. We talk a lot about the Gardnerian tradition because we both practice the same religion of witchcraft. And so most of our topics are surrounding that. So we thought it would be nice to talk about, the bigger world of witchcraft. So full disclaimer here, we're not claiming to be experts on these traditions. However, both of us, between the two of us, know people or are friends with members of probably every one of these traditions, or frenemies or enemies. We know these traditions. So for the most part, I think I have a friend who is in every one of these traditions I could think of, and just like other magical traditions, we're not the same thing, so we have different beliefs and different practices. So we're going to talk mostly about what we have in common. So what you'll learn more about the Alexandrian tradition is because we're going to talk about what we have in common and what we don't have in common with these traditions. And then, I suppose, what is the religion of witchcraft? So early on in the early revival, the religion of witchcraft was represented by people who called themselves witches and the covens that were operating in England. And they were led by various different people, like Gerald Gardner, Alex Sanders, Robert Cochrane, Charles Cardell, and Sybil Leek. Those are the big real names about, they're people who people like to try to talk about mythologically, like George Pickgall, or people who may never have really existed. But those are the actual people that did exist, not all of whom left an initiatory legacy, but they all left a story that is still being told today. They all had certain things in common, however. They all worshipped a goddess, they all worshipped a horned god, they all worked magic, they all worked the 8 Sabbats, and they all initiated into covens. So they all had that in common, and to me that basically represents the religion of witchcraft. That's the lens that I look at it through. However, different priesthoods are operating differently, and of course nowadays we have a lot of solitaires and eclectics who are people who've picked this up through books, and they sort of pick and choose based on different books. And then the umbrella's gotten so big now that there are a lot of people that use the word witch who do not actually practice the religion of witchcraft, which for me, that's the hard line where I think, well, you're not really a witch. Don't go around policing people, but that's my narrative. If you don't believe in the goddess, I don't consider you a witch. That's sort of how I think. But, there are people who do believe they're witches and they don't worship the goddess, and that's probably because they live in patriarchy.
That's true.
It's because of patriarchy.
You're not wrong. It's all because of patriarchy.
So anyway, so before we get into it, Levi's going to give his foreword, I guess, of whatever. I feel like I'm very articulate today.
You're doing great.
But we do want to say we are a call-in show, so we will announce when we're going to start taking calls because we want to get through a little bit of material so that you can have questions. The number is on your screen, 504-383-5266, but if you're using your phone, I don't know if you can see it. I have no idea. So Levi doesn't like it when I say it, but I think I have.
No, it's important. I realize
nice
the rules.
Operating voice. And we also want to say that we are on YouTube, and our channel is Hex Education, and we would love it if you would like and subscribe, because that's basically the archive of the show. A lot of people watch it on Facebook, but people do not go looking for videos on Facebook traditionally. So YouTube is kind of the archive of the show. So please like and subscribe to that channel so that you can also watch episodes that we've already done. So go.
Hello. No. My name's Levi, and at the beginning of the show, Brian was talking a little bit about what we mean by other traditions of witchcraft. We're not really here to talk about every single tradition that exists in the occult world or what labels itself pagan or neo-pagan or contemporary pagan. We're really focusing on, or I think we're going to focus, it's our goal at least, on people who identify as witches, right? Who use the term witch or witchcraft to describe themselves or the things they do, right?
And specifically priesthoods.
Yes, and initiatory practices. So not just anybody who describes themselves, but things that have built up over time and built a traditional lineage, right? Or a practice that is carried on by other people even after the founders of that religion are no longer at the center of it or have passed or whatever, right? That there is a continuation. The other thing we're going to address is the fact that a lot of people want to point out that you're a brunette now. Like a lot of people.
My hair is a hot topic.
Congratulations
Yes,
on being a brunette.
I am.
You're welcome. It's just a wonderful choice
Levi
for you.
preferred the blonde, but I think he likes this now.
Yeah.
It's really, he's not comfortable with change because of the patriarchy.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, it's an ongoing inside joke.
Sorry, I took a break there looking at the comments. Thank you to all the people who are joining us and saying hi and good evening. It's good to see you too. We're so glad you're here. Remember, you can always add questions and comments either on YouTube or Facebook. We see them all. We can put them on screen. We can answer things directly. We're really excited about that before we start call-ins. You can also, if you don't feel comfortable calling in, please do later though. But if you don't, you can do them in the comments and we will answer you. But to start out with, I think I've said the main thing, which is we are going to be focusing on traditions that label themselves witchcraft, that stem from the contemporary revival of witchcraft, or people who call themselves witches within an organized system.
And the similarities and differences that may exist between us. So I was trying to think of, like, the first thing we would look at is, like, what are global traditions of witchcraft? And obviously the first ones come to mind are Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft, which is what we talk about. Those traditions emerged in the 50s, so they've had 70 some on years to spread around the earth and propagate and establish themselves. So of course they are global traditions. You can find Gardnerians and Alexandrians in most places in Europe, America, Australia, Canada, you know,
a lot of it is in the Anglosphere, but it's expanding beyond that. There are lots of Alexandrians in Brazil and the Netherlands.
Yes.
You can
Portugal.
find Portugal. You can find Gardnerians in lots of places too. So
we are moving outside of Europe,
the Commonwealth,
but it's taken a long time for that to happen.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually quite recent, really.
But yeah, those are the two, and the reason is obvious. It's like in the beginning when witchcraft became revived as a religious practice and a lineage religious practice under the guise of the witchcraft of Gerald Gardner, and then eventually Maxine and Alex Sanders. Those were the most heard of and common and large
and
groups.
Survived.
And they survived. Mm-hmm. And so you will see Alexandrian and Gardnerian groups in various places around the world because we were the originators of the revival, right?
Mm-hmm. Whereas you look at some of the other names of the revival, like Cochrane, there's no legacy. You know, all we have of Cochrane are some letters and some people who've modeled themselves after the idea of Cochrane, but there's not an initiatory legacy or anyone alive today who was trained by someone who was involved. So that didn't go on. Supposedly there are some remnants of Sybil Leek. I have heard that, but it's not very big. You know, it's very isolated if it exists. Because she did have a coven called Horsa, and I believe there are still people alive today who were in that coven. So there are people kind of practicing her thing, but it's very small.
Yeah.
So not really a big tradition or anything. You know, and that's it. And Charles Cardell, nothing, right? So it was just the workings of Gardner and Alex that survived.
Did.
But today we have some other, you know, I was trying to think of what are the other global traditions, and the first one that comes to my mind is the Cabot tradition, because
it's very
I
global.
know how big it is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Very popular in Brazil, very popular in other places in the world.
Australia, yeah.
You know, so it is a global tradition, and it does function as a priesthood. It is not actually connected in any way to the witchcraft revival or our workings. Mm-mm. Now, Laurie was initiated by someone who identified as a witch, don't know much about that woman's practices, and she started her own priesthood, but it has some differences. I definitely classify it as the religion of witchcraft.
It's a religion of witchcraft, absolutely.
You know, it functions as a religion, it has a priesthood. It only has one initiation, but they are initiated into it, or can be initiated into. Mm-hmm. Not everyone who follows the Cabot tradition is actually initiated. So people get really confused because she's got the 3 classes that she does that she calls degrees. And because in our craft, degrees are part of the initiatory process, her 3 degrees are not a part of the initiatory process. It's just a part of a training thing. So people can go through these, and if they go through all those, they may be applicable to become a priest or priestess.
Yeah.
And what most people don't know is that there are actually Cabot covens. So they exist throughout the world, and they're formed by various different leaders and groups of people.
And they have an egregore, like they work from specific things. They have a specific rituals that they all understand, that they're trained in. The science of witchcraft is really popular. Various things that you can read in Lori's books.
And she teaches ethics.
Yeah, there's an ethical side of the craft in the Cabot tradition. And the big thing that we're talking about is it's a survived, lineaged, global thing. Like if you're a Cabot and you move to Australia, you can find other Cabots. And they will know what you're talking about when you start talking about witchcraft and the way you were trained. So that's kind of what we mean by traditions, right? Is they have a shared experience, shared ritual, shared egregore. And they definitely have that.
We have some things in common with them, obviously magic, Lori's focuses a lot on hermetics, which so do Alexandrians. We have that in common. She does teach God and Goddess. They're a little bit more polytheistic about it nowadays. I don't think she was originally, but nowadays she's a little more polytheistic about it, so they'll often say gods and goddesses. They do follow the 8 Sabbats, their version, of course.
Yep.
They have an initiation, they have covens, they have priests and priestesses. It is much more inclusive than Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft, so they don't have strong gender roles. It is different. So
they don't focus on sexuality as much.
No, there's no, that is one
fertility
huge difference. Is Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft are very fleshy, as Levi'd like to say. The sacred orgy and all that doesn't exist in the Cabot tradition, so it's not a part of their.
You have to bring that
up.
They're
part of their thing. So. We're all cats in the dark, right?
We're all cats in the
so that's different, obviously. We're not connected. That we're not a part of the same line of succession. And Lori's tradition is also American. It was born in Salem, Massachusetts. That's the birthplace of it. It's gone all over the world. And I do believe, it will continue.
I do too. It'll continue beyond its founders.
And to me, that shows that there's some power behind it.
Yeah.
It's got a ways to go before we can see how far that goes.
But I definitely think it will live.
You can't really tell about a tradition when the founder's still alive. It does change things, and I guess we still have Maxine, and she's a co-founder. So same thing, sort of, I guess, in a way.
We have to see.
Alex is passed, obviously.
And Gerald's gone.
But we still have Patricia, so, all of us have someone left, I guess. But it has gone far out of Lori's hands. Now, another thing that's different, though, is that they have an organization that it's kind of like the Vatican. They don't have autonomy the way that we do. So everyone still reports to Lori, like in some sense, if you're in the priesthood. They have requirements and things like that. So it functions more like that kind of a priesthood.
More hierarchical.
Yeah, they don't have the autonomy that we have.
We're much more pluricentric in how we rule covens. So
I definitely gave that a global one. The other one that I really hesitate to even talk about, but I think I have to give it a global one, and I might be wrong about this because it could just be the idea, but is what people call Dianic Wicca or Dianic witchcraft.
I have some things to say about this one. Her reach, she's one of those people, Z Budapest, whose reach was very much larger than the organizations that she founded. So she founded the Susan B. Anthony Coven.
She's mad.
But she is one of those people whose ideas. The important thing to remember also about Susanna Budapest, because I did a lot of research on this at one point. I don't know why I went down a rabbit hole. I was just very interested in that history of Dianic Wicca. It is not a religion that is separable from politics. It was founded by a group of people who were interested in radical feminism, particularly radical lesbian feminism. The writings of people like Mary Daly and Andrea Dworkin and stuff like that. Like if you know who this is, or the big 70s movements. So it wasn't separable from that. So I agree with Brian that it's complicated to say this, because I think there are lots of women-only groups in the world
that are inspired by it.
That are very much inspired, and
are they not actually connected? Are
they initiated or lineaged? No, but would they exist without Z Budapest or what her writings?
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. So I do consider them sort of a large.
It's kind of hard
movement.
too, because I know that in Washington, where I was born, there was actually an initiatory lineage group there coming from Z Budapest, so it did exist at one point in time. And then there's the other factor: do I actually consider it witchcraft? And generally, my answer is no, I don't. But it depends on the group, because like I always say, you have to believe in the goddess. I also believe you have to believe in the god. I think that once you've removed the polarity completely out of it, that's a huge tenet of witchcraft, of the religion of witchcraft. So being a goddess worshiper doesn't make you a witch. You have to have that sort of the semblance of the religion. What I was talking about earlier, what Cochrane believed, or what. Once you remove part of that, we talk about the goddess a lot because, as I politely often say, there's so much talk about God,
the God's doing fine. God's doing fine.
That we just don't need. We're a little bit more private about our God. So, but I do think it's a necessary component. So, and you're going to hear that with other things too. Once you exclude one of the sexes from something, I don't think it any longer fits into the mold of witchcraft.
And in defense of
doesn't mean I have a problem with separate things.
In defense of Diana Wicca, they set out to do that, though. They did not set out to say, we are trying to be a part of this specific religious tradition of Gardner.
But it has no connection with England or the original movement.
But they didn't claim to.
Or any of the ideas. Yeah.
The original Susan B. Anthony Coven claimed to be a separatist, lesbian, feminist, women-only religion. They did not claim to be a part of anything to do with the witchcraft revival of England. No. They were claiming to be a unique political religion, right? That had a goal in mind to separate women and women-born women. They do not include trans women in their religion at all.
They're definitely not inclusive.
No, they believe in what has been labeled in the, and actually I'm not going to give that term any more popularity.
To quote Z Budapest,
careful.
Women are not made on operating tables.
That is their belief. They're very rigid, and they do not accept trans women into their circles, and they do believe that born women need to come together, separate, and create their own spirituality. So I will give them credit in the sense they're not claiming to be that, though. They're not trying.
No, they're not. But see, where I have issues with that, which I would with anything, is that it's so after that. I mean, the religion of witchcraft was well established by the time they came along and did that.
Yes, it was.
So it's sort of misleading the public because that happened a lot and it still happens. And it is kind of a pet peeve of mine because I don't think people realize that the religion of witchcraft is extremely established, and that it has been established before most of us. There's probably very few people watching this that were alive when it was established. So it was established before we even existed for most people, unless you were born, and some of you might have been born in the 50s, I suppose, but, most of us were not. So it's already established. You don't get to rewrite history. And unfortunately, people just don't know that. And that is a part of what I do in my work. Now, like Christianity, things are going to evolve, change, people are going to have different ideas, but this is a completely separate thing. So to me, even though they use the identifier as witches, I don't consider them witches. I consider them a goddess cult.
I consider them a political goddess cult.
But it's done good for a lot of people, and I definitely think we have to give it the global.
I do, and the other thing about the Dianics is, like I said,
they're evil.
They're not separable from their political goals. There was no one in the original movement who believed that it was solely a religion. It was a political movement. They were more likely to be reading Mary Daly and Andrea Dworkin than they were to be reading Greek mythology. They were less interested in the spiritual practice than as the term witch as a political title for a rebellious woman, which is part of the history of the word witch. So, that's what they were latching on to. So that's a big thing.
So I was trying to think of 5 global, what I considered really global, impactful movements of witchcraft, and those are the only 4 I could really honestly say that I thought were. I know there are other ones that are cross-continental or whatever, but really global in a sense. However, there are some, lots of traditions that are more regional or close to global. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about fairy. Yeah,
fairy's a big one.
There's more than one tradition of fairy witchcraft, so we do not mean to confuse you. The ones that I know of there's the radical fairies, and then there's a spin-off of Dianic witchcraft, which is called a fairy tradition. And then Levi's going to talk about the Victor and
Cora Anderson,
He knows a bit more about it than I do. Lack of interest on my part.
There's a lot of people, though. There's a lot of books out right now from fairy practitioners, though. If we're talking about traditions that have reach and that people are reading online or talking about, very popular authors are connected to this tradition. And when it is complicated.
Doesn't make them good.
Judgment. So much judgment. There's a lot of confusion because fairy, as in the magical creature, the fae or whatever, is not what we're talking about. Those traditions do exist. And then there's the radical fairies, which was a gay men's group in the early days that was mostly about, sexual liberation and whatever. That's not the same thing. The fairy tradition that became lineaged and has initiations and has its own theology is spelled F-E-R-I in most cases. There are exceptions. This was started by Victor and Cora Anderson on the West Coast.
Was it an American tradition?
Yes,
and
but
around when was it formed?
Right. We do know for a fact that Victor, who's a poet, did write letters to Gerald Gardner.
So we he was interested in.
He was, and he had absorbed a lot of that. He also incorporated Hawaiian shamanism, or what that was at the time called that huna. He incorporated.
Do you know that just wouldn't fly nowadays?
No, it'd be so appropriative because they incorporated voodoo too.
Okay.
Voodoo. But they tend to have a unique. They worship the star goddess and Melek-Taus, the peacock angel, but they are initiatory in most cases.
Initiatory. Where they differ from us that I know is that they do offer same-sex initiations, which
I believe most of them
doesn't fly in Gardnerian or Alexandrian craft generally, so that would be a difference. But I do believe they do worship a god and a goddess.
They do.
Are they polytheistic, or do they have a main god and a goddess?
They're very open about the philosophy, but they have a main god and a main goddess.
So originally it was modeled that way.
Yeah.
They probably needed the Sabbats, so I don't know, is it the religion of witchcraft?
They're more ecstatic than fertility.
I know that they do, I do know they like their sex. I don't think they know anything about the sacred orgy, however.
They're kind of known for that.
Yeah.
So I do want to go back into our comments.
So that one's kind of, I don't know, because of the cross-gendered initiation, I have a bit of an issue with it, but I think I'd have to say it is the religion of witchcraft.
Yeah, I do too. They worship the god and the goddess.
Priesthood.
They practice magic. Yeah. They practice initiation.
So we have to acknowledge that they are witches in their own way.
I agree. So I want to go back. Joanne asked, what about, she said unsure of the spelling, like stregaria or strega, Italian witchcraft.
Actually, I have a lot to say about that.
So we can start there. Yeah. That was we'll address her question.
So the thing about, quite frankly, there are a lot of little groups and books that have been written around the subject, but it's definitely never been a tradition. Mm-hmm. Like, it's more of an idea. And it all comes around from Leland's work, which absolutely, Aradia, Gospel of the Witches, absolutely influenced Gardnerian Alexandrian witchcraft, the original witchcraft movement. It probably influenced Cochrane, it probably influenced Sybil Leek, it probably influenced Charles Cardell. They all had access to this manuscript, and it continues to influence us today. Most people who identify with being strega are generally identify as being Italian, and they generally have some sort of family story, which is generally untrue. It just happens to be the case.
Unfortunately.
So, but it's never really been there's no initiatory tradition. There have been groups started by certain authors or started by certain people where they have initiated, but it's definitely not global. It seems global because the idea is so big. You read about it in all these books.
You do.
But if you were going to actually go off that strega, really does come from Leland, then in a sense, Gardnerians and Alexandrians are strega because, we are intimately connected with those workings.
Yeah.
So, I think that, it's definitely an influence. The Italian culture, through Catholicism, through the folklore and writings of Leland, who was an American during the Civil War, actually, folklorist, it's just been impactful. And I actually recognize the power behind that manuscript. I think that there is some genuine, real information in that manuscript. I'm not saying the whole thing is Holy Writ, but I think parts of it are.
But it's definitely not a tradition.
No, it's just never been a tradition.
No.
There are groups, covens, and small traditions that have formed around the idea of it, but it's not, I don't recognize it as a tradition. Is it the religion of witchcraft? Absolutely. The manuscript is a part of the religion of witchcraft, the modern religion of witchcraft, and possibly an older version.
And if you are practicing from that tradition, you're most likely going to be doing things that would be familiar in other traditions of witchcraft.
Let's take a call.
Why not? Hi, welcome to Covendom. Hi, who is this? Hi, Ken, how are you? Doing well.
Did you have a question for us, Ken? Well, I absolutely do think there was an influence. I mean, it's quite obvious that both Gardner and Alex were aware of the manuscript, and in fact, Alex borrowed it from the library at one point in time.
Hint, hint, he stole it, yeah.
I think he returned it, though, didn't he?
He did return it, yeah.
Yes, they were both influenced, and some of Gardner's earlier magical workings, but they were influenced, it was influential in the magical workings. So it didn't really shape the spiritual religious belief or the, what we would call the witcheries, but it absolutely influenced some of the magical workings, some of the tools. There absolutely is a connection there, and particularly in Alexandrian witchcraft.
Can't hear the person.
I turned it up.
In apparently they couldn't hear you.
So sorry, caller.
In Alexandrian witchcraft, we are also consider ourselves occultists, generally speaking. So, for instance, I practice ceremonial magic, and a lot of Alexandrians do separately. We don't consider it craft, but some of us have those practices that we do separately. So I do magician work separate from my craft. But absolutely, having knowledge of both, I recognize that there is certainly some crossover. And if you read one of Gardner's first books, High Magic Age, he sort of spills the beans there, because the entire story is about these magicians working with a witch and how they combine these things to topple this dictator.
Real quick, just to check, caller, could you give us a quick shout out? And we're trying to see if our audience can hear your question. Perfect. Let's see if that comes through.
So if you didn't hear the question, the caller Ken was asking what influence that ceremonial magic, or specifically the Key of Solomon may have had with witchcraft, which my answer, well, you could hear my answer, couldn't you?
Yes. So, caller, I absolutely do think it was a massive influence. I think the grimoire tradition is all through the liturgy of modern craft. It gave a really good, useful system for basically organizing practice. So yeah, we do use it.
And I can tell you, and I don't mind telling you this, in my coven, the Key of Solomon is really the planetary system, our go-to planetary system.
It's not going to be that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you ask them to talk again,
And
please?
audience, can you hear our caller now? We've done a quick change. I want to make sure you can hear all of our callers. Caller, can you give us a shout out again?
That doesn't mean they can hear it. You hear it doesn't mean they can.
Let's see. But, Ken, did that answer your question? Of course.
All right. Well, obviously we cannot have this being fixed during the show, or it'll be extremely disruptive. So we may just have to tell people what the callers are asking if you can't fix it. Did you have another question, Ken, while you're on?
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling in.
Thank you so much. So one of the things while that's being fixed that I wanted to address were there were two people in the comments, actually the same person, doing two questions. It was Jeremy, and Jeremy asked about the Minoan Brotherhood is the first one. So I think we're definitely going to get there. So don't worry about that. And then I wanted to address one he just brought up, which is the Cultus Sabati, which is based on the Azawedia and other writings of Chumbly.
I don't know much about it, so go for it.
They're beautiful books. They're beautiful books. I've never met anyone who actually has a group or a lineaged practice associated with it. I think that there are people who are very influenced by his works. I think it's more of an idea, and I do think that the poetry behind it's quite gorgeous. I do think the Azawedia is amazing, but I don't think that it is going to have a sort of massive influence on the occult community in the sense of having traditions and lineaged covens. Okay, and then, so that was for Jeremy, right?
We'll just tell people what people say. It's fine. We don't know what the problem is, why people can't hear the calls. We'll have it fixed next time. It's fine. So, unless it's one of these, and I'm not going to start messing with buttons. There's all this stuff over
I believe
here.
in you. So, do you want to do Minoan Brotherhood now? And Sisterhood?
Okay, so the Minoan Brotherhood and Sisterhood, and you have to understand that I actually am friends with the senior ranking member of the eldest elder of the Minoan Brotherhood. I really adore Lady Rhea. I adore a lot of people that are involved in it. However, they do know my opinions already, so I'm not going to offend anyone. I don't consider it witchcraft. So the Minoan Brotherhood was created by a Gardnerian and based on Gardnerian witchcraft and based on the Gardnerian Book of Shadows. So he took his Gardnerian training and he made an all gay group, for men. The The reason it was done at the time, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, was because a lot of gay men were not being allowed into the American Gardnerian tradition at that time. So they created an alternative in New York, and it thrived, and in fact, a lot of American Gardnerian priests today are gay, and a lot of them are also in the Minoan Brotherhood.
Yes.
So, but it really is very far-flung from the beliefs of a Gardnerian witch, and it's very far-flung from the beliefs of an Alexandrian witch to exclude a sex from your group. We don't work unless there's at least one man or one woman in the circle, right? Unless you're by yourself, obviously. For instance, like Levi and I would not cast a circle together without a priestess. It just doesn't happen. And it's almost considered an abomination, and certainly excluding women from witchcraft is an abomination. Now, it wasn't born out of that. However, today it's not really necessary. So although I don't have anything against the people who practice it, to me I think of it as like a male mystery cult for gay people. I don't think of it as witchcraft. However, they do worship a god and a goddess, just not with women.
They do.
And, I don't think the answer to being excluded is ever to exclude. I think what they should have done is created a group that allowed gay men in, and kept practicing the way, that should have been the answer, I think. Instead, they abandoned a huge, these were initiates of a priesthood that had vows. I don't think it was the right thing to do. And I think it's actually caused some corruption in American Gardnerian witchcraft, because you have a lot of priests who have this misogynistic idea, because of the patriarchy, that they're taking from their Minoan movement and bringing into their Gardnerian circles.
I don't want to name names because I want to be very careful here, but I will say I have read for 2 Gardnerian. I'm a reader, as a lot of people know, not full-time, but as part of my life. I actually have 2 clients who are Gardnerian priestesses. No, I will not tell anyone who they are, but I will say...
they get branded oath breakers.
Well, they're not telling any secrets.
I know, but they'd still get branded just for talking to you.
But they are both struggling. This is in completely separate lineages and completely separate covens.
But they're both American.
With gay male high priests, who are their working partners, who basically are incredibly controlling and who are both initiated into the Minoan Brotherhood, and who bring this very weird mentality with them that is a little anti-woman. I'm not saying all Minoan brothers are like this, and I'm not saying all Minoan sisters are like this, but I will say I agree with Brian. I think there is something a little weird about trying to be a priest in a fertility religion, such as Alexandrian or Gardnerian witchcraft, that is so centrally focused on male and female roles and on the divine dance between the two of them. And then on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, you get to be in an all-male space where only male voices are heard. I think that's going to cause some issues. Now, if you disagree, I understand why. But
I also had an experience that I don't think is isolated. So when I was first moving to New Orleans, I'd stepped down from high priest of my original witchcraft coven, right? And I was, of course, putting my feelers out into New Orleans, the new community that I was going to be moving into, and I wanted to know what kind of covens were down there. And, I thought, well, maybe I'll practice voodoo. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was a new stage in my life, and I'm a magical person, so I thought, this is this example. I quickly found out there was quite the occult scene here, so I started talking to, I'd had interest at the time of possibly joining a Gardnerian coven and, starting training in a Gardnerian coven. And I'd started putting my feelers out, and I spoke to probably 4 different high priests of different Gardnerian traditions. And instead of trying to help me become a Gardnerian, they all almost insisted that I become Minoan.
yes.
And it was because I was young, gay, and good-looking. And they were serving the
This was a
Minoan
while
Brotherhood.
ago.
Stop.
This was a while ago.
It was a while ago. He's right about that. I'm still good-looking and gay.
You're still gay. You're still real gay.
Not as young. This was, God, it would have been 7-8 years ago by now. So, I might have a new
7 or 8 years of hard living.
So, but anyway, yeah, they actually didn't know what I looked like because it was all.
But you're right. They were obsessed. That's very common.
They were whining, and I flat out, I've got no interest in this, and they still kept doing it. I kept getting passed off to the other people. Now, there was no Gardnerian coven in New Orleans at the time, and there isn't now. But there was a Minoan priest here who has initiated a lot of people.
Initiated.
Yeah, so, and I'm not going to get into that, but I don't consider it the religion of witchcraft. I consider it a fringe cult. I don't think it's good for the Gardnerian tradition, how it functions. Now, the Minoan sisterhood, it's a different creature. I don't think it has the same negative impacts.
Me either.
But I don't consider it witchcraft either. I consider it like I consider Dianic witches. I don't understand. I don't think the answer is to ever exclude, number one. I also don't think it empowers women to separate themselves. It may give them a safe space, but it doesn't empower them. Witchcraft, the religion of witchcraft, empowers women to become high priestesses. You know, having the autonomy and the ability or the opportunity to lead on their own or with a partner. That's power over men and women. You know, having to remove yourself from men to have power isn't real power in a patriarchy. Doesn't mean we are against it.
No, I have mixed feelings about it because I think...
But it's not witchcraft.
I think that it's situational. So
It
I
is
think
situational. But
yeah.
And I love Lady Rhea, but she already knows my opinion. You know, so I'm not going to offend anyone because I've done it to their faces.
I have nothing against
So,
I will say this, and this is a personal
I don't have anything
thing.
against it. If you want to do it and you want to be in a female priestesshood that is a female mystery cult or, that's predominantly, because it's not all gay people in the sisterhood.
Yeah.
The Minoan Brotherhood doesn't allow straight men. It's gay men. Probably allow bi men, I'm assuming. But
I think they do.
But the sisterhood does allow for heterosexuals. So, women.
So here's
as far
what
as
I'll
I
say.
know.
I will say this, and this is my only thing, because we do have a lot of people who watch who are looking for entrance into things, an entree into the magical world. We get questions all the time in our DMs.
They'll both accept you if you're good looking.
Here's what I'll tell you, and I'm not sowing any paranoia or picking on anyone. I'm just going to say something really honestly. As somebody who's been in the occult world for a little while, who's got to meet a lot of people through my connections to Brian and other witches from around the world, and Christian and lots of other people.
Syndrome.
A little bit. I'm going to tell you one thing. I've met people from the Minoan Sisterhood. Yeah. I've met Dianics online and in real life. They're actually nice people. I get a bad vibe from not all, but from a lot of Minoan situations, and I do not suggest it. So I'm so sorry to those who are in it where it has spoken to you and it's a beautiful tradition. I'm just going to be honest here.
I don't suggest it if you're looking for a witchcraft priesthood, because I don't think that witchcraft, like I said earlier, one of my pet peeves, already established. You get people on the internet today that say, well, witchcraft's not a religion. Well, actually, it is a religion. It was declared a religion in the 1950s by Gerald Gardner. It's practiced as a religion by everyone connected to him. It is a religion legally recognized by several governments, and it's even in several dictionaries defined as a religion. It just happens to be one.
Karen. You're Karen.
As she walked through Costco.
Karen is watching. It's a good friend. Hi, Karen. Blessed be.
Blessed be. So anyway, yes, and they're not. I think that the Brotherhood is I don't know if it's really global. I think it's just an American.
I don't know. There's a lot of them now. It has exploded.
Well, because almost every American high priest that I've met is also a member.
I know. It's become a thing now.
I almost think they infiltrated. Like who's really running the show?
There's a lot of them now.
Yeah.
No judgment, again, but I said
I will
said what I
say,
said.
not naming names, but the elder that I was talking about, he has told me, and he's told his downline, hopefully this isn't too private, that it doesn't really serve a purpose anymore, because they are allowed to enter Gardnerian covens now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Jared in the comments is saying I've only met one brother who didn't throw me up alarms. I have to agree. It's I've met one or two. I think but in the other there's something odd about it. If you're going to frame an entire religion around a sexual experience, I think things are going to go a little haywire sometimes. I'm sorry.
Well, and you have to question motives.
Exactly, and I hate to say that because it sounds like we're fear-mongering.
If my coven was a dating service, it would have very different members.
It sounds like we're fear-mongering.
No thanks.
I'm going to let that go. Let it go. But I don't want to be a fearmonger. I'm just saying be careful, guys.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back and
we're
make
not
sure.
trying, we're just being honest with what we know about these things. Like I said, I don't have anything against people who want to join these groups. It's obviously not for me, or I would have done it.
Yeah.
But do I believe it's the religion of witchcraft? No, I don't. And I do believe in difference. I do believe that people can be in the religion of witchcraft outside of Gardnerian and Alexander witchcraft. Like I recognize Cochrane as practicing the religion of witchcraft.
Yes.
I don't recognize people who associate him with practices that most people don't even know he worshipped a goddess. Like they don't know that because they think he's part of the Stain Gang and worshiping the devil, and it's just not the truth.
And remember, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you could call us in, especially so we can check our sound. If you want to call in, the number's on your screen.
504-383-52666.
Yes, please call in. We will answer your questions about the many varied traditions of witch.
All right, so we've talked about the fairy tradition. Let's talk about some localized ones. So here's the thing. There's a lot of like local groups that popped up that people don't really know about, and there are a lot of traditions that are really just a coven, and
or a few.
A lot of people will start their own tradition, and they don't even have any people. It's not really a tradition until it's been passed on beyond you, in my opinion. Like, you can't really create your own tradition. You can try, and I think that is done. I'm sure it will happen again, but I don't think any new traditions are going to rise to the standard that Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft have. I don't think so, because I don't think it's needed. I think a lot of seeds were planted in the garden early on, and some grew and some withered on the vine.
Yes.
And I think some witchcraft movements are meant to be temporary, because maybe it's the best thing that can happen in that place and at that time, and it's taking someone on a journey. But it will wither on the vine, because once its purpose is complete, it no longer has one.
So Frank has an excellent question that I'm going to put on the screen. What are the list of things that make a religion or tradition the religion of witchcraft?
Well, for me, obviously other people are going to disagree. Some people might say you have to be a part of the initiatory line of succession. Mm-hmm. I've kind of broadened my definition beyond that. So you have to worship the god and the goddess. I don't think it's a polytheistic movement, but there is some gray area there, right? So you have to worship the god and the goddess. Specifically, it was always the moon goddess and the horned god in the early movement. Whether you were Gardnerian, Alexandrian, Cochrane, Cardell, Sibylique, all horned god, all moon goddess. Yep. So we were worshiping the same idea. So our gods, you don't get to be Christian without Jesus. You don't get to be a witch without the horned god and the moon goddess. It just happens to be an already established thing, whether you like it or not. I think that also just the culture surrounding it. Obviously, you have to be practicing magic because magic is a part of our religion. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, the original movement, did the witches' sabbats and all that sort of thing. I think that's a lesser importance. To me, it's really magic and the god and the goddess are the primary things I'd be looking at. However, obviously, I believe in a lot more than that. I believe in initiation. Yes. I believe in, a coven. I believe in a priesthood. I believe in all of the things that we do, but I can broaden that and look at something else and say, well, this fits the bill enough to me to be classified as a religion, right?
Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi, I have a question.
Fantastic. Who's calling?
My name is Thalassa.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You as well, dear.
So what's your question?
Okay, so
they may not be able to hear.
Do you feel when you bring someone in, do you feel once they're in and they're initiated that you can just kind of go ahead and give them, I don't know, not all of the secrets, but a lot? Or do you kind of feel like it's better to let it come out like a faucet and trickle, and then maybe, give them access to little bits and dribs and drabs, or do you just give them the whole shebang?
Well, in the Alexandrian tradition, we like to say there are no secrets, only mysteries. So I think that the initiate must go through the experiences, and a lot of it is self-discovery through those experiences. There are some secrets that are kept for third degree, for high priesthood. But for the most part, I believe in the Alexandrian tradition, all the training, the majority of the training takes place at the first degree. We don't do the second degree alone. We do the second and third together. So you really are a first degree, and if you're going to go for your next initiations, you would get your second and your third degree in one glorious ritual. Glorious. So all of the training takes place in that first degree, and we're very on hands, and we're very experimental. We meet once a week. We have kind of an organic training system. Some covens don't operate that way. So Gardnerian's a little harder to discuss because you have a lot more diversity because of the different lines. There's so many different lines. There's more different lines in Gardnerian than there are in Alexandrian. So because of that, there's more diversity. However, so the training might differ depending on what line you're in or what coven you're in, of course. Mm-hmm. It's true of anything, right? You've got good teachers and you've got bad teachers. Like, that just happens to be the case. So I don't think it's... I think you could turn the faucet right on, but they wouldn't get it if you did.
Agreed.
But I also don't believe in holding back for the sake of holding back. If somebody's ready to ask the question, they're ready to get the answer. There are very few things that we hold back in our tradition. Very
And
few.
I wanted to add on to something that Brian is saying here, which is it's very much respected in training in traditional craft of a hunger for knowledge. So the student needs to ask. You know, it's very similar to when the Masons say that
Nothing in the
freely
craft is
given,
given.
yeah, freely given, never offered.
Yeah.
You know, that's a thing from Masonry that we could apply to craft. Freely given, never offered.
Very true.
You know, and so I think one of the reasons that I've seen certain people excel in craft is because they're very curious and they ask and they take risks and they want to know more. And the people who fall behind in it or who go a little soft in it are people who think that it's going to be given to them at some point and they don't have to make any effort. And the path of craft is a path of discovery. You must constantly be asking, searching, and trying to figure out. You cannot just assume that it will be given to you in a curriculum.
So
Lovely.
I'd say we offer experiences. That's what I
Yes,
would say.
experiential learning. It's very much an experience of learning, and I like the way that we've preserved the way that, from stories that I've heard from Maxine and other people, the way that Alex taught, which was if you missed it, too bad, you'll have to come back, and it's always done in this very holistic way. It's not laid out in this easy to accessible format because you need to experience
There's an
it.
organic curriculum in the sense that obviously, like, there's certain things that we go through, certain experiences we go through, and those experiences, whether it's in a circle or whether it's hermetics, are repeatedly shared within the tradition.
Yes.
However, like Levi said, you have to be there to experience it, you know.
Yes.
So
it's not given.
and you don't always get it the first time. Sometimes you don't get it for many years.
And you have to experience it to get it.
That is true.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you so
Have
much
a great
for
night.
calling in. Have a great night.
So, I wanted to speak a little bit about, we were talking about localized things.
Yeah.
So I came up originally from a very organic tradition, I guess you could call it. It was really not a tradition. It was a localized tradition, didn't have a name, just called itself Witchcraft. Came from a woman who'd started a coven there early in the 80s, I believe. And she was connected to a lot of things, and she created a downline and, you know, had her own origin stories. But it was the religion of witchcraft. You know, it was, in some ways, it was like practicing what I practice now without any of the good training, kind of, really, honestly. So, like, you know, but it had great people in it.
Judgment.
You know, well, I mean, they didn't have the opportunity. That's all it was.
That's fair.
You know, they did their thing, right? So coming to New Orleans, I've got a priestess in our coven who was a part of something very organic, and you do get this, and I don't want to dismiss that this happens. Sometime in the 70s, a woman named Anita Toops had a store, the first store in New Orleans for witchcraft, and I think one of the first stores in the country. I think it's a toss-up between her and Laurie Cabot with who started the first store, or if it was the same time, because they were both the same time period in the 70s. But she also started she did start the first witchcraft church within this country. In other words, she did her 501c3 status. And it was called the Religious Order of Witchcraft. Absolutely no connection with anything that was going on with Britain, you know, and nor did they really originally have any ideas that were similar to ours. It developed in time that they did. Mm-hmm. They had a particular high priest who I think was cunning enough to realize that Gardner wasn't completely, you know, full of it. And so he started adopting some of those things into the order. But it was a generational thing. It's still going on today. It's definitely not global, but it does exist in more than one place. And adherents of it still are alive today. And hopefully she is going to be putting a book out about it at some point in time.
Which would be amazing.
But it's cool because it's like it was something that was born in New Orleans, just like the Cabot tradition was born in Salem. This was a tradition, the Religious Order of Witchcraft, and in some ways, we've been blessed because, you know, we've gotten to sort of be connected to that in some way, and it kind of connects us to the place that we're in. So,
yeah,
spirit of place. So these localized groups and these localized customs start up, but I honestly believe it's because that the power behind the religion of witchcraft is much bigger, and sometimes I think that the gods manifest things because that's all they can do at the time. You know, which is why I do encourage people, if you don't have a group that, you know, maybe you want to be Gardnerian, you want to be Alexandrian, but, you know, it's more important that you're able to practice your religion, right? Or you practice your magic. So you might have to join another tradition, or you might have to start your own group. Just be honest about it and realize that that could change at some point in time.
Something I want to address is when Brian's talking about traditions that actually have staying power or are more than one group, one of the things that I think created this belief that there are hundreds of traditions of practicing witchcraft is I remember before Witchcraft, before
Witchcraft.
before Witchvox died, it used to have this section called Magical Traditions. And lengthy articles. I mean, it would be pages and pages of the Georgian tradition, the Algard tradition. And it gave this impression.
We've had a lot of books like that,
yes,
too.
that these traditions were massive, when in fact it would often be one or two covens at most. Or maybe even just one.
Or a weird guy in his house.
Or one person.
With a couple people on the internet.
Exactly. And so it gave this impression that there were these huge living traditions.
Yeah.
When in fact it was like, oh, 3 people are doing this, but because of the internet, they've made it seem like we are a tradition of the same caliber as the old, ones or whatever. But that was not really true. And it's not a moral judgment. It just was a reality. Like, there's lots of traditions that I will see entire articles written about on pagan blogs. And I'm like, there's like 4 of those in existence on the planet, people. Like, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and name them all, but there's a bunch of them. You could, like, somebody in the comments, I do remember, asked about Sayax Wicca, which was something that Buckland kind of invented. Buckland,
he did invent it.
Not kind of, he did straight up.
And he was honest about it. Like, this was a Gardnerian high priest. He created a system that was for non-initiates because, honestly, it was a book to sell.
And
however,
is it
some
a
people
tradition?
For a little while, there were people practicing it, and they had initiations apparently that he was involved in at some point. But it became very confusing.
Yeah.
Because you had startup groups just based on the book. So does it exist now? I don't really think so. I think most of these traditions, you talk about like Georgia witchcraft, Wicca. You talk about CX Wicca, or you talk about a lot of these Llewellyn traditions. I don't think they really exist anymore. Like Blue Star, there's people in it, but I don't know if there's any covens operating after that. I mean, unfortunately, they had a scandal, which is part of the problem. But it's definitely probably, I think a lot of those Llewellyn-born American traditions have begun to wither on the vine very quickly. Yeah. Because they do not serve a purpose anymore. Whereas what you do get instead is you either get initiatory craft or you get honest eclectic groups that are just starting their own group, and they're not trying to be anything, which I approve of that. Don't make it up. Nobody's going to want to join your tradition because you made it up. Not anyone good. That the day and the age of that is over.
What about,
they might join your tradition because they want fellowship of someone.
Here's one that I forgot. What about the Welsh tradition?
Well, the problem with the Welsh tradition is nothing to do with Wales. And it is really localized. I think it's very popular in Massachusetts. I don't know. I should know more about it than I do, but the problem is there's a bunch of different labels.
That's the thing.
And once again, there's a lot of people that there is no actual Welsh tradition. You know who the Welsh tradition is right now? Alexandrian craft. The only covens I know of in the Welsh area are Alexandrians. Probably Gardnerians too, but there's no one over in the UK saying there's a Druid order.
There's a big Druid order.
There's not, and the guy that he's worked with us in WitchCon or Hexfest.
Christopher Hughes. I'm reading his book right now on Caradwin.
My teacher knows him. He's known for
but
he's doing.
He doesn't identify as a witch.
No, he created his own Druid order. And people have joined it, but it's not witchcraft. But there's no Welsh witches over there. So you've got some Americans who call themselves that.
And they use a lot of Welsh god names.
It's a tradition. Do I think it's global or historic? I mean, it definitely falls under the religion of witchcraft. Definitely has a priesthood. I mean, I do consider them witches in that sense, but I don't think it has anything to do with I think it's another American example of a startup thing. Well, what I notice about it is it often has members who are members of other things, and I think that's where the power comes from. Sometimes it's like a thing is kept going. Somebody was asking the difference between Massachusetts witchcraft and New Orleans. Well, one thing, to be honest, there's not a lot of covens in New Orleans. Like, when I moved here, there was a scattered few, and they've all sort of dispersed, went away. I'm sure there are other covens than ours, but I don't know of them. I don't know of another coven in New Orleans besides the New Orleans coven right now. So if they are out there, they're being quiet about it. And please continue to do so. In Massachusetts, however, that is such a hub of interest in witchcraft that you really have every tradition under the sun in Massachusetts. So you've got the Cabot tradition, you've got Gardnerian, you've got Alexandrian, you've got Dianic, you've got Satanic, you've got everything you could possibly imagine is in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Now, what I will say about that culture is the culture of witchcraft in Massachusetts is very different than anywhere else in the world, because no offense to all of you that are from there, my husband or anyone else, y'all have some weird ideas about what the craft is. It has nothing to do with being famous. It has nothing to do with running a store. It has nothing to do with being in Salem. It's just, and the more traditions that you join does not make you better at it.
But that's a big thing there.
And I think part of the culture. It is.
It is a difference.
So that would be the difference.
In the UK, I have, and I'm only speaking about the UK because that is the birthplace of a lot of this. When we've talked to a lot of our elders or whatever, I have heard of people who will be like Alexandrian and then they'll move to a Gardnerian or vice versa. What I don't hear of in the tradition
outside of Salem,
but that is massively popular here. Well, it's popular all over America now, which is if I'm one thing, I'm gonna be them all. I'm gonna initiate into everything.
All of the priests that I know who are like that
started in Salem
or have lived in Salem at one point in time or initiated by people in Salem. It is a thing there. Not everyone does it. I can name a lot of people who don't. Lori's very much against being in more than one tradition. I agree with her. If you're going to be in a tradition, be in it, be good. If you feel like you need to be another one, you're in the wrong one. Like if I felt like I needed to be in another tradition, that would tell me that I'm still chasing the dragon. I'm not in the right tradition. So if you're really going to be a priest, a priestess, a nun, you kind of have to commit yourself if it's real. And I do know a few people who I think are very sincere, but they suffer from this idea that being in so many things makes them better at it or makes them look better. I don't think it does.
It's like a pedigree.
It makes it look like you're non-committed. And when you have conversations with these people, they get confused. They get really confused. They do know that too. They mix their drinks so much they don't know what circle they're standing in at what time. And of course, they'll declare that right away. When I'm in an Alexandrian circle, I do it Alexandrian. When I'm in a Gardnerian circle, I do it Gardnerian. When I'm in this circle or that circle, why? Did the gods need to hear you that many times?
It is interesting to me. This sort of
sad,
tradition
really.
Collecting is very weird. To
so
me.
that would be the difference I see there, honestly.
But again, I'm not morally judging.
And the people who think because
it seems weird
they own a shop or because they followed Sean Poirier around, Christian Mike Madman, that somehow that makes them a great witch. No, it doesn't. Has nothing to do with it, at all. A person who read a book might know more than you. Sorry,
he's in a mood.
I've been so exposed with that. I've got the dark side. I do see the light side of Salem. There's no greater microphone. You could be a witch in London. You do not have the microphone that someone in Salem and Halloween has.
Valid.
It's just the truth. So it has very positive sides for it, but at the same time, it also has negative sides. Christian moved away from there for a reason. It's got a very toxic environment. And so it's sort of the good things about it and the bad things about it are extremely both intense. You know what I mean? So is he yelling at me? Or
he might be. I think he might be yelling at you. We'll see.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I do own stores there. I do have friends there. So
no, Salem's fabulous. It's not a judgment on it. It's just it's a different culture.
Very different. If you have not lived there and you have not been exposed to it, it's different than anywhere else. And the people who live there don't know that it's different from everywhere else.
Well, it's the norm,
They don't.
right? So I want to read something Elohim said. I actually, in a minute, might put it up on the screen, where he says, people who find it difficult, he puts this in quotes, to enter a strong, firm tradition end up reinforcing the echo of pocket traditions, and they sort of join lots of other things, abandon them, start their own. I think that's actually true. I think there's a big fear of structure and a fear of missing out. That's at the root of all this, and a fear of not doing the right thing. And so people are very tearful and fearful of committing to anything, and they get very they're always pussyfooting around and not wanting to do anything serious. That is problematic because it's very hard to actually grow in anything if you're not having a sense of commitment towards it. And so if you do, one of the things that I notice about multiple tradition hopping is that it's often this excuse, well, if, let's say I'm not feeling the spirit or I can't raise the power or connect to the gods in this tradition, well, that's okay, I'll go to the other altar, maybe they'll come there. And it's like hedging your bets of who's going to...
I think it's also, especially in Salem, I think it's a lot of FOMO too.
Yeah.
Fear of missing out. I get there's a lot of, in America, a lot of cross initiates who are initiated in different things. They're terrified that somehow they're going to be left out. And, you get it a lot, you are what you are, and that's the thing that I think that people fail to realize. If you think and act like a Gardnerian, you're a Gardnerian. If you think and act like I mean, we're individuals, but there is actually a difference in the philosophies, right? You get that with other traditions too. You're not going to join a Dianic, group and be like, hey, I'm dating 3 guys. I love me the D.
They're not going to love you.
It's not going to work out. So you can't just, getting the campfire badge doesn't really make you a thing. Being a thing makes you a thing. It's like saying you're a witch or making the claim that you're a witch doesn't make you a witch. Being a witch makes you a witch. Getting initiated doesn't make you a witch. Being a witch makes you a witch. So that's the whole thing. What that is, different people have different opinions about that.
So I'm going to put something Frank set up on the screen again, which is, it's a good question. When a prospective witch is accepted into an Alexandrian coven, so if we initiate someone, do they have to drop or put on hold any other practices they have or religious group affiliations they have?
Well, in the craft, there is a rule that you are not supposed to belong to more than one coven for all of the reasons that I just said. So you're only supposed to belong to one coven, one priesthood is what it's emphasizing, really. Mm-hmm. I would not actually allow a new initiate to be involved in any other occult group, and if they were too involved in one already, I would not accept them for initiation or training. However, there are some gray areas. For instance, if someone might be like a Mason, I probably wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
However, if they just join the Masons, I might put it on hold for a while. So there's gray areas, and it's up to the teacher. So as far as the rule, technically speaking, every Alexandrian or Gardnerian coven has the right to expect you to only belong to their coven. Whether they choose to enforce that or not is up to the high priestess and high priest.
Mm-hmm. So I'll add one thing to that. There are certain things, like if and when I run a group, there are certain things that once somebody had been established, I will say in the beginning, no, I don't want students to be part of anything else. I think mixing your drinks is stupid in the beginning. I think it's a good way not to learn anything. People are always like, well, I'm comparing and contrasting and building all this. No, you're not. You're a dabbler. You're a dilettante. And
a dilettante.
You're just a dilettante. That's all you are.
Because of the patriarchy.
It's all armchair sorcery, and it bores me to tears. But if somebody was very established in witchcraft and they wanted to explore other things, there are certain things I would have less of an issue with, like occult orders that don't claim to be religions, things like that. So it's not completely exclusionary. But if you wanted to be a member of a separate priesthood, that would raise alarm bells to me, because I would wonder why you were not able to connect to the gods fully, why you were not able to experience the mysteries fully.
I would think I would say you're not committed.
Exactly.
And we do get that, I think that we like to believe that every initiation takes, and all that sort of thing, but it just doesn't. That's not how it works.
No.
I think it has an effect. It's a very powerful spell that you're casting and that other people are casting with you. It has an effect. And if you're sincere, it's going to have the right effect. But not everyone is sincere, right? That's the question that I would have with somebody who's chasing dragons. Were any of their initiations sincere? Were they stepping into it just because they knew someone, or just because they wanted to unveil a secret, or because they thought it would get them closer to some hidden knowledge, or because they were afraid of being in the wrong tradition? It
also, I think, for some people, becomes just a social thing.
Yeah.
Where it's
I think there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that, where it's just, well, I joined it because it was a group of people I liked. My friends were in this, but I'm initiated in this, so I joined their thing too, so I can hang out with them.
Which is one of the reasons we practice the no socializing rule, is because it kills that dead. When you join my coven, you're basically told right away, I'm not going to hang out with you.
You can't sit with us.
I'm not going to hang out. I'll train you, but I'm not going to hang out with you. I'll worship at the altar with you, but I'm not going to hang out with you.
But it's important to
you're not my friend. And if you cry or you get sad, I'm not going to care, because I'm not your friend.
Wow.
Right?
I mean, I wouldn't go that far.
I mean, I have friends in the group now, but they're third-degree friends. If they cry or get sad, I care. But we don't talk about it with outsiders. It's not some of those things. So, like, when Levi's crying, because he does it all the time.
Just, full face. It's a lot.
I give him an ear, and I pretend I'm paying attention.
Oh, good Lord.
But if an initiate were to do it, they'd be sent out straight away.
Yeah, you have
I'm
to
having fun with you all, just so you know.
Of course.
No, it is a great rule, and it's actually born out of the occult orders. It's not born out of witchcraft. There's not actually a rule in witchcraft that you have to practice a non-socializing rule. There is rules surrounding covens, autonomy, secrecy, separation, things like that are kind of at the discretion of the high priesthood and should always be respectedly assumed that that's who you approach. However, within the Temple of the Mother, Maxine Sanders' last great coven, she adapted the no socializing rule from other occult organizations, and it worked brilliantly. And the downlines from the Temple of the Mother have practiced that to this day, and it works brilliantly. You know, I'd say most of the issues that I have ever had in the craft were when I didn't follow that rule well enough. It has avoided so many problems, you know, and, you know, but it's not really a craft rule. It's the way we've chosen to run our groups.
Yeah. And
I go off course there.
No, you're fine. Bringing it back to the topic, though, I will say, remember when I said it at one point in the show, there's a lot of traditions that just had articles written about them and they pretended to be traditions. There's another thing that happened, too, where some traditions were basically just excuses to come together at the Sabbats. Just because some people had decided they were a member of something didn't mean there was really good training. Training is a separate thing than allegiance.
Yes.
So if we all come together and we say, we are all the blue opal tradition of witchcraft.
I'm not joining that tradition.
Okay, but let's say that's
Terrible
the thing.
name.
Terrible name.
Sounds like a Gardnerian coven in America.
But let's
the
say
Maplewood Coven.
In blue opal witchcraft, we meet on the Sabbats and we do this.
Led by Lady Stardust.
There's no training. There's no curriculum. There's no mysteries that are exposed to you. It's really just an excuse to come together.
Sponsored by Slim Fast.
At certain times. This hateful creature. So, like, do you see the difference, though, viewers? Like that's the difference. It's like, are you in something that's training you in the mysteries, that's training you to open yourself up to spiritual experiences, or are you in a group of people who meet at certain times during the year and isn't that nice? Well, not to be rude here, but I mean, you can do that at the Elks Club. I mean, like, you can do that anywhere.
You need to know what you want. You know, there are worship covens that's what they're about, getting together and worshiping and having that sort of family feel. And that may be what you want. You wouldn't like my group. Because you wouldn't feel like you were in family. You'd feel like you were in school.
I mean, maybe like the Manson family. Like,
you feel like you're in school, or you feel like you're in something hard. You know,
what kind of family would we be?
We would be like a very like hard, wealthy family that like expects a lot out of you.
Nobody makes it past 52. You know what I mean? Because like it doesn't end well.
You know, like you're expected to become a doctor or something. I think that's.
And if you don't do it, or if you do something inappropriate to the family, they just never speak of you again.
Yeah, you're put
Christmas,
away. You know,
you're just she's at the home.
We give you a drink and put you on the front porch.
She's at Saint. You know, it's like Saint
She's
Gertrude's.
on vacation.
She's at Saint Gertrude's.
She's on a retreat. She's on a retreat for 4 years.
Our Lady of Prompt Succor, House of Ill Repute.
Oh, anyway. Other traditions. So anyway, we talked a little about localized. We talk about cats living under my house.
There's a cat under the house.
There's cats living under my house.
What?
Ever since I got that mass statue, there's been cats living under the house.
You brought them here.
I didn't.
She's chosen you.
They're feral, though, I think. I don't think
She's chosen you.
2 of them are black.
I love black cats.
Big, beautiful black cat.
I love black cats.
Then there's a little gray tabby that I think is female.
A brindled cat like Macbeth.
Yeah.
They're witch kitties living in the house now because he got a bass statue.
Tiki, do you want a kitty? Tiki.
You
don't want a kitty? You don't want a kitty?
If he gets his face bit off on this,
This dog would never bite me. I don't know why he's growling
that
at
is
me.
the phrase said by every single dog bite victim in the history.
He's a talker. So Tiki, you don't want a kitty? You want a kitty? You don't want a kitty.
We have went so far.
So he doesn't want a kitty. Anyway, all right, that's fine. Go back down there. I don't know what you're doing. I think it's Levi. He doesn't like the show, see? Maybe he doesn't want to be on camera. I don't know what it is.
He's camera shy. Let's go with that.
No, I think that they're tired. They've been really mopey today, and he's comfortable. He don't want to be moved.
He has a cat-like face. You.
I do. Yeah, what, Cheshire cat? Anyway.
The Cheshire cat.
So traditions that I believe have gone extinct. You know.
Okay, wow.
Hard
turn. Hard turn.
Like, meaning I just don't think they're a thing anymore. I already mentioned the Georgian tradition. I don't think that's really
There's a
thing
couple
anymore.
covens of that, I think.
I'm not saying they don't exist, but I just think that it's probably just not a thing anymore, right? Blue Star.
I love how Brian's just not accepting. I'm like, I've actually seen Facebook pages, and he's like, no.
Well, I met a really sad lad that was involved in that, and he was a third degree. I think he's in the Minoan Brotherhood now. Very sad lad. I think some of the people, I think it does exist, but I don't think it's really a thing. It's probably very localized. It's not like, okay, like you get a book and it says the Georgian tradition leads people to believe that like this is something that's existing in America. It's probably like in one state, maybe two, I'm just saying it's not really a thing. What other ones that were... Strega was one I thought about.
Is Algard
never a thing anymore? No, Algard went extinct a long time ago. I think it's become a thing now because you have so many American Gardnerians who are like, I'm also Alexandrian.
But they don't practice a separate tradition called Algard.
No, that was really one. It was Mary Nesnick tried to make it a thing, and at that time you wouldn't have had Gardnerians and Alexandrians in America touching each other with a 10-foot pole, really. So neither tradition was accepting it. It was just her coven. And what it was, from my understanding, in fact, that there are still people connected to it. But they don't call it Algard. They don't practice that. They usually actually say they're Alexandrians now. They don't call themselves Algards. But from what I understand, she was initiated by an Alexandrian and then had some training through Buckland.
Okay.
I'm not sure that she was completely honest about things. Alex did know her. There was a correspondence between her and Alex. He, one point in time, dubbed her the Witch Queen of the Americas or something like that, or Witch Queen of New York or something.
Very lofty.
He liked to give titles out. The king could do that. You could just get a title.
Couldn't either.
You could be the Duchess of New Orleans.
I don't want to be the Duchess. I'm a man.
He looks like a duchess, though, doesn't he?
No, he doesn't.
So anyway, I'm a man.
Like he's a man. Marquis.
I'm Butch.
Duke. I wouldn't go that far.
Anyway, Duchess. Ooh, that's your new nickname.
It is not.
I finally found a nickname for Levi. Duchess. The Duchess.
We're not doing that.
We're
not doing
I'll
that.
make it a thing. You just be behind your back.
I will never answer it. I can tell you that.
The fur coat. I can picture you with the fur coat.
The fur coat. The Duchess. Why do I have to be the Duchess?
I don't know. It just sounds good. I bet your boyfriend's laughing right now at that.
Why would I be the Duchess?
I don't know, Patrick. Why would he be the Duchess?
I'm like not even like... It doesn't fit me. You're the Duchess. You're in crushed velvet. Like this person.
I would not be a Duchess.
In crushed velvet, who owns Versace slippers, is being like, "You're the Duchess, sir."
I would be higher ranking than a Duchess.
That's the highest peerage before the royal family.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So first of all, you would be the Duchess, sitting here in crushed velvet, drinking red wine with enough gold jewelry to make Liberace blush.
Shirt. He has the same shirt.
With with enough gold jewelry to make Liberace blush. I'm looking at it, the thing. Yeah, please, Duchess. The lack of class consciousness here, people.
Anyway, so let's see. What other traditions do you think that people think might be around that really aren't anymore?
Honestly, I think a lot of them. I think two things about this. Number one, any tradition that people might find in an obscure website or whatever is going to be so small that it's going to be hard to find functional covens of it anyway.
Or wackos who say they've started their own tradition.
And the second thing is, next
time somebody tells you that it's their tradition, ask them how many covens they have in their tradition.
And the second thing is
operating. Okay.
The second thing is also, I think a lot of moderns don't like the idea of tradition anyway. Also, my partner is literally listing all the things that make me a duchess, including my pearl necklaces and my shawls.
Patrick. Yes. This is amazing.
First of all,
totally the Duchess.
Yeah, obsessions with roses, maybe. I'm not a duchess.
I'm a prince. I am not a duchess. I am a prince. A prince among men.
I'm a bishop. Can I take that? Churchy, but still a little fancy.
Yeah, you can be a bishop.
Thank you. I don't be a duchess. It's not the Duchess. I absolutely refuse to accept this. Like I'm not.
It's gonna be like your famous name now.
No, it's not.
It's gonna be branded with it. The Duchess of Witchcraft.
I don't want to be the Duchess. Thank God.
I'll be Patrick.
And, damn you. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi, how's it going? This is Stephen from Australia, Sydney.
Hello, Hi, Stephen.
How's it going? Hey, thank God I got through. I've been trying for ages. I actually I put a post up just before about I was really liking what you were saying about males initiating females and females initiating males, and the balance of gender and sort of approaching the other. I guess my one thing I noticed just with my own practice was when I actually work with a female, the results just turn out so much more interesting and quite vivid. And I just wanted to ask your comments about that. One thing I noticed especially was with working with things like spirits and with evocation. I noticed that when working with someone of the opposite sex, the results are quite magnificent, to put it lightly. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that.
Well, I definitely, there is a reason that we work with men and women in a witchcraft circle that goes beyond just some sort of religious belief, right? There is a physical difference between men and women, right? There just is.
Yeah.
Just like there's physical difference between anything in the world of matter. And so there's a different vibration, and you can see it in like all the old alchemical woodcuts. And it was often considered kind of an occult secret that you had like these alchemists pouring and making all these things on these woodcuts, and it's always a man and a woman doing it. And that's a secret that's being displayed right there. No secrets, just mysteries. It's being displayed for those who know. Because they're not really, a big secret with the alchemy is, were they really trying to make gold, or was that a metaphor for something else? Levi's like, they're probably trying to make gold.
No, spiritual alchemy is always been a thing.
So I think that, obviously in witchcraft, yes, I do think that man and woman can accomplish things together. I think that, that's a big part of our system anyway, is the male and the female energies. And we're a religion of flesh, as above, so below. So the things that are represented in the spirit are also represented in the flesh. So I think that there are certain things that can be accomplished between a man and a woman that you cannot accomplish on your own. Doesn't mean you can't do things on your own.
Also, I will say, because I think Brian covered the philosophy behind it quite well. In a more experiential note, I agree with you, honestly. In my experience, working with a woman is different. It is more powerful. The difference between us does actually matter.
It obviously has to be the right woman.
Of course. But the concept
absolutely.
I find that there is a power there in that working between the two, the difference, that I find very beautiful. And not only beautiful, but sometimes terrifying and powerful. And I wouldn't give it up for the world. I just wouldn't.
In the design, if there's an intelligent design, if there is an intelligent design behind the creation of the human race, and this experience that we're all having, if that exists, which I believe it does on some level beyond our comprehension, they wanted to make sure that we could only create life with two separate people that were different. That was just a part of the design. It is in nature as well, but in different mediums. I believe that that's like teaching us something. Just like I said, I kind of believe that falling asleep is teaching us about reincarnation. Like, I think that the things that happen in the flesh I think that's the real holy book, the real story that's being told. It wanted to make it very clear, you cannot create life on your own. You need help.
Yes.
You need help, and you need help from something very different than you. So, in my opinion, as an occultist, if that's true in the flesh, it's probably also true in the spirit. As above, so below. Right.
So I would agree with that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I found that even just manifestation of results, it's almost like the male and the female energy give birth to it somehow.
Yep, fertility.
It's just been quite an interesting experience. So, yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
This one's a bit deep. I suppose regarding I guess the manifestation of divine energies upon the earth plane. If, and this is just totally hypothetical, but supposing a priest and a priestess, or a male and a female, were to successfully invoke into themselves the god and the goddess, and have a child from that, conceive a child at that time. Are there legends or stories? I mean, I've heard a few legends and stories, but what are your thoughts about, I suppose, the birth of almost like a divine child
I mean, I will say this, and I'll let Brian
from that
answer.
union?
I'll let Brian answer more fully. I will say, I mean, in the mythology, in the mythologies that we tend to touch on, there are lots of stories of divine children, born on the earth. I mean, there is something to the story that Isis and Osiris might have originally been an actual king and queen, and Horus their child,
Yeah.
whatever. So, I mean, there is part of it in the mythology, but I'm going to let Brian answer more towards the more real world mechanics of what you're talking about.
I think that, as a magical person, I think all things are possible. However, I think it would be a dangerous road for human beings to attempt such a practice. Very terribly irresponsible, and here's why. You're creating possible delusion. You don't really know that the conceived child isn't just a biologically conceived child.
Yeah.
And you'd be putting a lot of pressure on that child. You'd also be creating a life with an intent that may not be the will of that life. So I think people who were attempting to do that on purpose would be extremely irresponsible people who might need to seek therapy. However, can a divine soul be incarnated at any time? Sure. But no, it's not like an actual practice.
Wouldn't it be nice, though?
I've heard a bizarre myth that some people believe that that's something that the priesthood was actually trying to accomplish. I really hope not. I think it would be very sad.
Wouldn't it be kind of nice, though, if we could say, like, yes, if we just flat out told him, yes, one day the child of the goddess shall be born to us, and he shall tear down the false god.
Why does he have to be a him?
No, I said tear down the false god. And
no, you said him.
I said child of the goddess. She shall rebuild the world in her image, like cast down all false idols, and it'd be great.
Well, I mean, we do have the legend of Aradia, and Aradia was the daughter of Diana, sent to teach the witches.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of, Aradia. That's the exact
I don't
person I was
think that it
thinking
has
of.
to take place in a ceremony, though. I think that we do have. I think that there are some human beings that do have work to do on Earth. So that could probably happen in witchcraft too. But I think it'd be a great movie, but it'd be very strange if you actually had. I heard someone say that once that asked me, is it true that some of the Gardnerians are actually trying to do that? I hope not. I hope not.
No.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Okay, cool.
Because God certainly
guys.
wouldn't come into a Gardnerian circle to be born again.
So thank you for... Did you have any other questions?
Oh, no, that was all. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. See you later.
Always.
Yeah. But no, it is funny that you do see that in mythology, though, but I do kind of like the secret idea of what if we could bring the child of the goddess back again.
Jared, you can probably go back and watch all of our episodes and see that question answered 100 times. I'm going to encourage you to do that.
Yeah, it's in a lot of other videos.
We've covered the topic so many times. Sorry. I think the answer is pretty clear, obviously.
I'm going back because I did let a few of them go, guys. Sorry about that. Do you want to? I think we already...
Oh, actually, yes. No, I'll answer that question. So Jeremy Williams was asking, what about Christopher Penzac?
Yes.
Well, Christopher Penzac was, I believe... I don't like him. We'll just put that out there now. But this answer has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like him. I think he's a weasel of a man. But that's nothing to do with what I'm about to say. He is a Cabot. He was initiated into the Cabot tradition. What he teaches, he's got his Temple of Witchcraft. It's not a tradition. Basically, he's teaching Cabot witchcraft. That's what he's teaching. So, there you go.
I feel the air kind of left the room there for a second.
I don't like disingenuous cowards. Anyway, but this has nothing to do with that.
You don't even exist to me!
Nothing to do about that. Okay. I mean, he can talk behind my back. I can talk in front of his face, right? So anyway,
I feel like we've picked a wound. So
no, it's not a wound. I don't care about him. He's boring. He's very boring.
I'm kidding.
I don't understand why people find him interesting. No, we're not going to talk about that, Christian.
So, yeah. That was a long time ago. But no, I think honestly we've covered all the major ones. I love this. Elohim says, every time Brian says he doesn't like someone, an angel gets its wings. There's a lot of angels in the world, then, Elohim.
No, I don't dislike that many people. I greatly respect Laurie Cabot. And I think maybe in some other universe, I suppose I could have been a Cabot, given no other alternative. That was totally a joke. No, I love Laurie Cabot, and I read some of her books. So
Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hello, Mr. Cain. Hello, Duchess of Witchcraft. No, I'm just kidding.
I
Hi,
refuse.
Levi.
Oh, please keep that going, Brian.
Nobody's ever going to get an answer, Devil Brian. It ain't going to happen.
I'm so sorry. I take it back. But with respect, I just had two questions.
Be your drag name.
I don't like drag. Go ahead.
First question is for Mr. Cain. I believe it was in the beginning of the podcast where you talked about how some things in our history, whether they actually existed or not, you gave a few names of people, and I believe I heard George Pickingill. And I was just curious if you could elaborate on that as far as, because I don't know if you, I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that George Pickingill part, because I've seen pictures of him, so I was just wondering what you meant as far as, whether these people existed. Are there rumors that George Pickingill didn't exist, I guess?
I can answer that question very well. So the famous picture of George Pickingill is actually not George Pickingill. And
Shut up, really?
It is not. And in fact, the relative of that man's picture, I can't remember his real name, did come forward. It's not really his picture. So George Pickingill was a real person, and there is witchcraft folklore surrounding him. However, all of the stuff that we heard, that he was somehow connected to Gardner and this was his picture, it's all untrue. However, there are myths about George Pickingill. He was a witchcraft myth. He was a real person. It's kind of like Mother Shipton. Was that her name, Mother Shipton? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Real people with a lot of folklore around them, sort of like Marie Laveau. So he absolutely did exist. Unfortunately, the Pickingill papers and all of that stuff that became modern myth, I believe, is completely fabricated. He is a character where it's really hard to separate the truth from the myth, right?
Right.
But so
is it kind of like how it's kind of hard to when talking about who initiated Gardner?
He's so mad.
It's kind of hard to.
Yeah.
But we actually do know who initiated Gardner. Tiki, stop. We do know who initiated Gardner. No, he was actually... The difference between Gardner and Pickingill, for instance, is that Pickingill is literally, there are stories about him, doing really crazy, mythological things, he's become a mythological character, and it's hard to separate the fact from the fiction. He did exist as a person, and there is, he may have been a witch. That may be true. However, what you get in all that modern stuff, which is still being passed on and propagated, and hey, I used to believe it. I really did. I believed all that stuff too. So, but unfortunately, it's just, he's being used to support things that just didn't, there's no fact about it. But the truth of him is he was associated with witchcraft.
That's very interesting, and I love your answer because that's really opened up, and it kind of bleeds into my next question when you talked about, because I've read very lightly on George Pickingill, I will say. I have not read fully on him, so I have not read about these extraordinary mythological feats that he did. But in talking in respect to that, this question is, would it be too limiting to say that witchcraft as itself cannot operate outside of the laws of nature?
I don't think anything can operate outside the laws of nature. So yes, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. And the only reason I ask, this is something I always tell people, and people are like, well, no, because this and that, or we can fly, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you can't fly. You rub oil or ointment on your skin, then you trip and fly. Anyways, point is, witchcraft, to me, how I view it is like a mirror of nature, It's like, it's witchcraft is birthed from the relationship and harmony of humanity and nature.
Well, most of our gods, that we associate with witchcraft are gods of nature in a sense,
Right.
Obviously, the ancients, as we like to call them, or pre-Christian peoples, they looked at nature and the gods of nature a little bit differently, in a sense they weren't thinking about like environmentalism and things like that, obviously. But natural forces, absolutely. And, you know, there's a good reason why the god of the witches is often seen as part animal. You know, and that is because it's a representation of that carnal side of nature. So, you know, I absolutely, you know, I hesitate to say that witchcraft is a nature religion, but it is.
Right.
You know, I hesitate to say it because it's kind of a modern narrative to say that. It was a fertility cult, which of course is the cycles of nature. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're looking at. You know, I mean, I know you get a lot into the folklore and the mythologies around the witch, and I completely understand why it inspires you. But it's all about what lens you're looking through. And sometimes that lens changes in your walk or in that moment. But,
very much
you know,
so.
I think Pickagill's real interesting. There was a book written about him that is probably the most authentic material. It was written as I wish I could remember the name of the book or the author, but you can find it. You know, if you search enough on the internet, you'll find who it was. So you can study his legends. There are legends. I think it might be called the Legends of George Pickagill. I don't know. I don't remember. But there are legends that are actually documented about the man or the mythological man that lived in Pendleton or whatever it was.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
The second question mostly was because recently I found myself in a weird, not argument, but discussion with someone who literally believes that humans can fly. And I don't know, of course, this person referred to themselves as a witch and, you know, took on that label and all. And it was just really confusing because, you know, as I said here, that goes outside of the laws of nature. But I think they were just getting confused with how witches do fly, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, I think that person probably sounds like they have mental illness.
Yeah, I don't think
Right, and unfortunately, this is the price we pay for being on social media and
and
talking
also,
with
like,
others.
magic does not necessitate that we go beyond the bounds of physical reality necessarily. We're dealing with the psychological and spiritual reality and the numinous. We're not here. And I've talked about this on this show ad nauseum, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I'm not into psychical research and trying to prove that magic is a quantum physical whatever. We're going to lose that fight every time, and all the psychical research organizations I've ever been involved with or read about are either crappy scientists or they're just full of like desperate, hopeful people. Like, the fact is I don't think it's the same realm.
I have seen very strange things. You know, I'll tell
100%.
you. I saw a doorknob turn on its own once. Well, more than once. I've seen.
You saw what?
Doorknobs turning on their own. But I don't think, you know, I've heard a lot of explanations as to what this could be. I was associating it with a ghost at the time. I was in my teens. Nothing to do with witchcraft, you know, unfortunately. Or did it, you know, I don't know. Some people said it was me because I was going through puberty, right? Like, I've heard people say that. Yeah, I was going through puberty and it was that time. But I've seen it. I don't think that's going outside of the laws of nature, though. I just don't think we understand all of nature. You know, human beings can fly. They get in airplanes. You know, we can fly to the moon. You know, so human beings can already do some pretty amazing things, and to primitive minds that might have been interpreted differently. You know, so I think that you know, obviously, you know, metaphorically, what I would classify that as astral travel is what we like to call it.
Yes.
That
exactly.
could be done with occult discipline. But
I don't think it's literally true.
You know, no, I don't think anyone's flying, nor have I seen anyone levitate, though I have seen someone appear to levitate.
We are aiming for Kitzer, but we're going to live in Malkuth whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Witchcraft is a religion of the flesh.
And we're not going to be able to leave that. So.
Yeah. Not yet, anyway.
Well, thank you both so much. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Same with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, we had a couple of questions I wanted to go back and look at. So Charlotte asked, what about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? That's not the only reason we didn't bring up that, Charlotte, is because we weren't talking about occult orders tonight. We were talking about witchcraft. Yeah. So there's lots of living occult orders, Amorc.
That absolutely is still a thing.
Yeah, there's tons of them. You know, the OTO and whatnot. Yeah. We really weren't talking about that. We were specifically talking about people who were identified with witchcraft, right? So that's why.
I think that it gets, the main thing is that I think people are still confused about it, is that there is a religion of witchcraft. It exists. You may not believe in it, you may not be part of it, but it started existing in the 1950s. We can argue about whether it existed previously. We can argue about its right to exist, I suppose. But it does, and it's been recognized. I hate that statement when people say witchcraft is not a religion, because it's the stupidest thing you could possibly say when it's already recognized by governments as a religion and when people are actually calling it their religion. Yeah. Like, whether you like that terminology or not, it may not be your label, here nor there. But it's in dictionaries. Like, it just happens to be a thing. Sorry if it doesn't work with your agenda, but it's a thing, whether you're part of it or not. Sorry, bandwagon.
No, but yeah, that is the truth. I mean, honestly, like, witchcraft was envisioned by Gerald Gardner and other people as a religion.
And it's been practiced as such since.
I mean, it is our religion, so.
And all this other nonsense comes from it anyway.
All this other nonsense, he says. What is it? The perfect one. I had it. I lost it. No, wait.
How quaint. Even the rabble.
Even the rabble.
See, he's mean.
I'm not.
He likes to paint me as the mean one.
You are the mean one.
The Duchess is mean.
I'm not. First of all, it's never going to catch on. First of all. Second of all, I'm not the mean one.
In the comments, you want to make a bet with Levi right now about who's going to get it to catch on. Do you think Brian Cain can get Duchess to stick?
I will not answer it.
Well, he's not going to answer.
What is that old quote? You can't control what people call you, but you sure as hell can control what you answer to.
He doesn't answer things anyway.
So yeah, he was talking about the difference between witchcraft and ceremonialism.
Do you get fan mail yet?
I get messages.
Do you answer them?
Sometimes.
Sometimes the Duchess does. Sometimes the Duchess does not.
Again, I will not answer that, so not going to do it.
We all know who you're talking about. All right, do we have any other questions?
There was one, let me get back.
I think the Duchess is kind of a cool name.
Yeah, but no thank you. Like, I hardcore hate it. Like,
Tiki just growled. He's like, I don't like it. Oh, is that what's happening?
Going on, yeah. This dog, I swear.
What is wrong with you? All kinds of feels. Mr. Bossy.
Going back, Luke mentioned that he had seen, there is a Vice documentary, for example, that has a group of people in Romania, older women who call themselves witches. I've seen that documentary.
Oh, it's great.
But it's important to realize that a lot of people...
British colonialism.
Yes, they're translating a local Romanian word that into the word witch.
It's called English privilege.
And so the fact is a lot of magical practices are called witchcraft in, although they are using the word Romanian does have a cognate word, like in Spanish and French or whatever for witch. They are calling them that, even in Romanian, but they're not latching onto the religious history of witchcraft. They're latching instead onto the concept of a witch being anyone who practices malefic, particularly malefic
which
magic.
Which is a definition in the dictionary.
Yeah, and it's part of the history.
It comes from British colonialism. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There's 3 definitions you can go by that still exist that are occurring. The anthropological one that is a product of British colonialism, where they ran around the world calling everything witchcraft or black magic. That's a witch doctor in the hut. And that's how that definition became formed. Wasn't before then. There's the church's definition, which really is mostly that it's the religion of hell, right? I do like to point out that they early on said it was the religion of Diana, the last goddess of the pagans.
Yeah.
But most of it was, the devil and hell. And it was a religion. You were practicing the religion of hell. That's what witchcraft was. It was not
the
magical
religion
practice.
of hell. That's intense.
So that's the second definition. And then the third definition is the one that was brought forth by Gerald Gardner. Those are the only 3 definitions. And everyone who's talking about witchcraft today is following one of those definitions. But in the church, they did not use witchcraft to describe magic. That was not how it was used. So, and unfortunately, that's the only historic record we have. The only close thing we have is Christian.
Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi, I just had one question. I heard in one of your episodes before where you mentioned that you felt that the Christians worshipped their God was actually the devil, and I just wondered if you could expound on that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't remember saying that.
Yeah, I don't think you're quoting it quite right, so I'm not quite sure how to answer it. I don't think that Christians... I may have at some point in time said, trying to think of things I say that line up to that, that sometimes that Christians are so obsessed with the devil that sometimes in a way I do think they're kind of making it a god. That's probably not what you're quoting.
That might be it, though.
Might be. Obviously not all Christians, but I can say I had a Christian in my life who, growing up, who was very obsessed with the whole Antichrist thing and the devil, and spent more time focusing on all that than he ever did Jesus. So in a sense, I was like, you're kind of almost like a weird devil worshiper. Like, even though that's
they bring
what
up the devil more than anyone.
Even though that's what you fear, you're in like this weird, like, almost like
love-hate relationship.
Right.
End times cult, sort of thing. So that may have been what I said, but unfortunately, I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you can think of what I was, if you can clarify that in the questions, I'll be happy to answer. But I'm not sure. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. I don't remember. That's the only thing. I don't
I'm
remember.
like, what would I say that?
I honestly think
like
that your comment probably is where that comes from, along the lines of.
I probably said some off comment about the devil's their god or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm
maybe.
guessing. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
Thinking, what do I believe? That's the best way I can dig that out. But not all Christians. There are good Christians out there who aren't obsessed with the devil.
So Frank asked, last question of the night for him, what do you think about working across tradition lines between witchcraft traditions, like ecumenicism, like if we work together with Gardnerians?
Well, we already sort of talked about that. Sometimes Gardnerians and Alexandrians have worked together, and that is usually for the purposes of just fellowship and worship in certain areas. It's very rare. I don't think that, I think that it's very important in witchcraft that we realize that witches need to stay separate quite often, right? We don't do well in large groups. We're not designed for it. It won't end well, right? So we very rarely will covens come together for like a grand Sabbath. The online experience has been very positive and very negative for the craft because it puts a lot of people together who shouldn't be together. I don't need the opinion of somebody from a completely different tradition interjecting into my personal world, but the online sometimes makes that happen, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not. A lot of people were probably like, but you do that to me constantly. It is what it is. Witchcraft is an important subject. You're talking about people's religions, and there are very few priesthood who are actually out there publicly talking about it. So I don't think there's much of a purpose to be served to have cross-tradition gatherings, but it does occasionally happen with Gardnerians and Alexandrians because we both recognize, many of us, recognize that each other's initiation is valid, and so we are okay with bringing that person into the circle. But what you have to realize is that we are oath-bound to only bring people into our circle that we see as legitimately initiated into the rite of succession, and opinions vary. So, for instance, I'm not entitled to go into a Georgian circle, and a Georgian is not entitled to come to mine, and there's no actual connection other than ideas. So that wouldn't be seen, whereas there's, most people believe that Alex was initiated into basically what we now call Gardnerian witchcraft. So in a sense, Alexandrians are actually connected to Gardnerian witches. Neither one of them used the label early on. That's something that was born later. And because Alex was such a prominent leader in the craft, he made a name for himself before there were traditions being labeled. Yeah. So soon after, what do we call your witches? And the name was coined by Stuart Farrar, Alexandrians. So, yeah.
What?
Did I answer that? You got anything? You got anything to offer, Duchess?
I think. Don't know who that is. Can't help you.
I cast you out, unclean spirit!
Shove it up your ass!
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ! It is He who commands you! He who flung you! Hence of heaven!
What did you do?
Of hell!
Fuck him!
Be gone!
Fuck him, Garrus!
From this creature of God!
Stop! You can't. Don't touch it again.
Be gone! In the name of the Father!
Christian!
And of
What
the
the
Son!
hell?
Of the Holy Spirit!
We have nothing to do with this. Christian made these buttons. I
thought it was literally just the one line from The Exorcist of I cast you out.
Don't know what's wrong with my husband.
I did not know it was the full stream of profanity that Reagan screams afterwards.
Anyway.
So that never call me that again, or we're going to have to sit through it again.
Goodness.
It was, Christian said it was supposed to be cropped. It's the whole thing. I feel bad now.
It wasn't your fault. It's fine.
Oh, God, that's hilarious.
That wasn't on purpose.
I feel like I just let the air out of the room. Everybody's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I don't know what just happened.
It was so aggressive. I love that movie, but it's been a while. I forgot how intense it was.
I think Levi has embarrassed himself now.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Anyway, so...
The Duchess is good.
So witchcraft, tradition or not, a lot of people don't have traditions anymore. But I think, witchcraft is a religion. It has a priesthood, global, expressed by many different people. This has been going on since the 50s. We're in 2021 now. So, it's older than Scientology. So,
Are we?
I would think so. Or
Probably.
at least as old.
Probably. I don't know when when did Dianetics come out? I have to check that. Now we just need their power and money and lawyers.
What do you mean we?
This, and I'm the Duchess. Do you hear her? Do you hear Madam over here? Like, please, in her crushed velvet. Like,
I'm a prince, not a madam. Madam is like a Christian could be madam.
No.
No, that doesn't go well for me, does it?
No, it doesn't, honey. I was about to say, like, follow this through. Follow this through.
All right. Anyway, do we have any other questions now that we've been blown out of the water? I don't even know what time it is.
I know, it just blew it out. Well, we're nearing the end.
Levi ended the world.
I did. I just sent a lightning bolt of horror through all of our lives. I think we've answered all the major questions near the end. And honestly, I think we're kind of petering out, not just because of the Exorcist slip up, but also because Brian's right. A lot of these traditions
they just
really exist in theory, or they exist in the ether of the internet, or they exist in one or two covens or whatever, and that's fine. We're not judging them. We're just saying it's not the same thing.
This is also a really big country. So, in England, you've got Gardnerian and Alexandrian covens scattered all throughout England. Like, they're not really that hard to find. Obviously, you've got other things now, too. In a lot of ways, the UK is, started to be influenced by American craft, which is horrifying.
It's going to happen, though.
But it has happened. And it's horrifying. You get, I was talking to a guy today, and I know what he's doing. He's buying into things of people who are saying, we're practicing Cornish witchcraft. And they're probably people who currently live in Cornwall or whatever. But they're not practicing some old thing. They're doing some really new thing, and it's just, So anyway, but in this country, most initiatory craft is on the East Coast because that's where it came into the country, and this is a really big country. So we have a lot of states that do not have any Gardnerians or Alexandrians. We have many states that have neither, and most states have none of this, really. So you've got a lot of different ad hoc covens and people starting their own thing based on what they can get in books. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not even trying to discourage it. It just happens to be, I think the reason why it happens so much in this country, especially early on, is because, people are like, I want to get initiated, but there's nowhere for me to do it.
Yeah.
However, I will say, if you were really bent on being a doctor, you'd have to go to medical school. You'd have to make a lot of sacrifices to do that. So it is possible for anyone. If you're driven enough to do it, it is possible. Is it difficult? Is it accessible? No, not unless you're one of the lucky people that happens to be there. I mean, we are the only Alexandrian coven in the South. There is one in Florida, which the South doesn't claim. We really don't, right?
It's its own thing.
Well, we didn't, anyway. Maybe now. Yeah, it's not really Southern.
It's its own culture. It's a little different than the...
Trump lives there. It's not South. So...
I shivered a little.
Or he did. I don't know where he's going to live. He's probably going to have to leave the country.
Anyway, let's not get political.
We're not really political, but we assume you all hate him, because we do.
Very much so.
Anyway, yes, so we'll call it a do. I don't actually have anything in the pipeline for the next episode, so we'll have to think about that. So if you guys have any ideas...
shoot us some ideas.
This is season 3. So I do have a weird idea for season 4, and I'm stewing in my head, but I'm not going to tell anyone, even Levi, yet. But
it's macrame. I bet it's macrame.
It'll just be a show called The Duchess.
We're not doing that. First of all,
And
that's
the
a movie
Prince.
already with Keira Knightley, I think. I think it's Keira Knightley.
I've never seen it.
It's a terrible movie, but...
I'm buying you a fur coat. It's just going to happen. You're going to come here.
Okay. I mean, like, I'm not going to say no to that.
Would you wear a real fur coat?
Oh, I'm not doing that online. I'll tell you off camera.
I have a real fur coat.
I
don't care how you feel about it.
We're not ending on that, first of all. Oh, my God. Like... I don't care what you think about anything. Bye, guys.
I mean, it was already dead. I didn't kill it myself.
Okay, this is... Look what seeds you've planted. Like, I'm going to have to deal with this. No. I'm not...
That is witchcraft.
I'm not doing this, guys. I hate this nickname. Save me. But no, it's been lovely.
It's going to be on his tombstone.
Here lies the Duchess. We'll see you all soon. The next topic, like Brian said, we haven't...
don't have one yet.
Given yet, but shout out in the comments.
Yeah, if you've got any ideas, sometimes you guys have been very inspiring. Hearing what you talk about is always great. So,
yeah, make sure you give us some. I've already got some coming through. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time, guys.